Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
It is with great pleasure that I get to introduce my sponsor. This guy's the only guy who's, after 24 years, his voice is still louder than the voices in my head. And because of his unselfishness and his give and his good sponsorship, I just get to stand for you, a sober man, tonight. And he's always been an example, a great example, and he's always been my leader in Alcoholics Anonymous, John Scott from HELODES, Texas.
We just love having John come in our home group. I've never seen a guy who could always cry reading the first part of the fifth. But he does, and it warms my heart. It really does. That gratitude shows. Well, my name is John Scott, and I'm an alcoholic. And I've been working at this thing since December 19th, 1982, and I haven't had a drink since the day I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. And sometimes it sounds like you need to do that. I thought when I first got here I needed to get a divorce and I needed to go back out, because that sounded like what we do here. But just so you know, I'm an oddball. I haven't gone back out, and I still married to the same woman, you know. And I'm glad too. I want to thank Laura and the committee for asking Cindy and I to come. And like Cindy says, it's always a great honor to do this anyway, but it's nice to do it together. I thank you for allowing John to chair this meeting. John, when I first met John, he come up to me at a conference, and he's not a little guy, and he comes up to me and he says, I just want you to know I hate your guts. And I go, well, he says, and would you sponsor me? And it's been a great relationship now for 24 years, I think. So God don't always tell me what's going on. I thought I hope I can outrun this guy. So anyway, it's nice to be here. It really is. It's Alcoholics Anonymous is the single most important event of my life, and I don't expect anything will ever come close to it. I almost don't know what to say. It's a blessing to be here, and I love California. I really do, and I love the people here. And I never drank here, though. You know, I drank in a lot of places, but I never got drunk in California because I never made it this far. I would go on these huge trips and almost get out of town. I was raised on a ranch in southeastern Montana, and my folks was always in the ranching business. All my grandparents, my uncles, my aunts, I mean, everybody's in the ranching business in my family. And I would listen to these cowboys, most of them was all World War II veterans, and they'd like to talk and tell these stories about going to town and getting drunk and having a party and chasing wild women. And I'm 8 or 9 years old. I'm enjoying these talks, and my mom would run me out of the bunkhouse because these guys are pretty colorful. And they'd always talk about drinking and how much fun it was and stuff. And I like John, I remember. And by the way, John, that was a great talk last night. And Helga, you did a great job too. You guys did. What I was moved by is the way that you carried the message of Alcoholics Anonymous through your story. And if you wasn't here last night, you need to see if you can get those CDs, because they were really good talks, both of them. Anyway, these old cowboys, they'd talk about this drinking and how wonderful it was. And I remember my first drink. We were moving some cattle up the Powder River in southeastern Montana, and it's a dry, hot country in the summertime. And this guy in his pickup comes up, and he waves everybody over. So all these guys ride over there, one of the neighbors, and he had this gunny sack full of beer, been heating up in the back of his pickup for probably all day at least, and here, have some beer. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great, and I was probably about 8, 9 years old. I went over there and I thought, man, this is going to be great. I'm going to be like a man. I'm going to have a beer, and I opened that beer up and I took a big old swig of that and spit it out. I'm choking and spitting and spit. It tasted like something that might have come out of that horse I was riding, is what it tasted like. Oh, it was bad, and I'm going, hell, I cannot believe that these clowns think that this is something good. I don't know how in the heck they could do this. How can they do this? And about 5, 6 years later, I found out it was pretty easy. And the first time that I ever had the effects produced by alcohol, once I had enough of it, my life changed. I mean, it changed right then. I remember that night really well. I'd borrowed my mother's car, and she was out of gas, so she gave me her credit card. And I lost the credit card. I had footprints on the ceiling of her car. I got stuck in the mud with some other guys. We had bought some beer from this guy over on the other side of town, and I already knew how to hide beer before I even knew that I was supposed to do that, And I had stashed away a secret stash in my car, and got in a fight with this gal, and she beat the crap out of me, and I went to this dance. I couldn't dance before that night. I'd always so embarrassed about asking people girls to dance with me, and I'd go up and ask them, and they'd say no, and I'd just be devastated. I just wouldn't do it anymore, But after having a bunch of beer, I walk up and ask them to dance, and they said no. And I just kind of felt sorry for them, And the next thing you know, I just started asking the next one and the next one until I got 1 or 2 of them to dance with me, and I enjoyed the effects produced by alcohol, just like the book talks about. I really did. I mean, this is great stuff. It makes me it's like the missing part. It's the missing part. And if you're new here today or the last couple of weeks, and you're not really sure whether or not you're an alcoholic, I heard something the other day that just makes me laugh every time I think about it. This guy, he's new. He's only got about, probably 2 or 3 months, and he says this at the meeting, says, if I wasn't an alcoholic, if I was a normal drinker, I'd wake up early in the morning and drink all day long. You tell that to alcoholics and we all laugh because it's just, yeah. And you tell that to Al-Anons and they look at you funny, like, why would you do that? And we're going, well, why wouldn't you do that, I was always amazed with Cindy, I was a kind of bar guy that I'd go in the bar and they all pretty well knew me because they were my best friends there, and I drink in 1 or 2 places. I drink in a place called the Keg Bar, or else I drink in a place called the Northern Hotel. The Northern Hotel is kind of a fancy joint, it's where the lawyers and the doctors and the ranchers and the businessmen all drank, and the Keg was completely the opposite. It was the losers and the has-beens and wannabes and the ne'er-do-wells, and I fit really well in either place. It just didn't matter to me. And anyway, I was the kind of guy to walk in the bar, and the deal was 2 at a time and keep them coming, and they knew what that meant, but I'd go drinking with Cindy every once in a while. Now, Cindy's never going to make it to Alcoholics Anonymous because you got to work at getting in here. We just don't let anybody in here like Al-Anon will, you've got to work at coming in here. First off, you got to be really committed to screwing your life up just where it's almost irretrievable, she'd end up ordering these umbrella drinks, you know, and they'd be all these fancy colors with fruit and stuff in them, and I'd have these two, and she'd have her one, and I'd have my two drink, and they do weird stuff, you know. They get a drink out and they talk, you know. They just talk. I mean, drink it, you know. And if she'd ever get one or two of them down, she says the damnedest. She says, "Oh, I don't want no more. I'm starting to feel it." What is wrong with you? Drink past whatever it is that you think you're feeling, for crying out loud, you know. And she just is never going to make it. But she, I mean, I played in like I said, my dad and all my family are ranchers, and about the time I turned about 18, I decided to rebel a little bit. So I joined a rock and roll band, which really made them all happy. And I was playing one night, and this gal with the blue eyes underneath the black lights, and she's sitting there just staring at me. And I played that first set and went outside, and we did whatever we was doing that night, and I come back in, and here's this gal again. She's standing right down there just smiling, looking at me, you know. I'm going, oh, this is going to be all right tonight. And then the next thing you know, the dance was over, and I ran out to the front door to try to catch her, and she never showed up. And I didn't know that she had to get home before her mother found out she'd snuck out. But the next day we'd gone back to pick up our equipment, and we was across the street and looked over there. As an old friend of mine, the band all knew him, and we called him, "Come on over." And Ron started running over there. Well, right behind him was her. We didn't see her, and you know, get in the car. So Ron gets in the car, and she jumps in the car, and I've never been able to get rid of her since. And it's like a piece of gum stuck on your shoe, you know. So she's you know, I mean, we were just absolutely in love with each other. And I mean, we've been buddies forever. But you know, after we were married for, I don't know, about 10 years or so, she'd gone bad on me, and I mean, we really got to fighting. Like she said, neither one of us would give up, because that meant the other one won. And we just would not turn loose of each other. And I had designated driver long before I knew that that's what we needed to do. And I would go out and get in the car, you know, stumble out of the Northern Hotel and get in the car, and she'd drive home. And we lived out in the country, you know. We at this time, we was living at a feedlot, which is quite a ways out in the ranch, and she'd drive me home. And of course, when I drink like I drink, I get really sleepy, and the next thing you know, I pass out, and she pulls up in the driveway and parks in the garage. And this is Montana in the middle of wintertime, 30, 40 below zero, and she rolls down all the windows and slips outside, shuts the door real quiet, and gets in the house and goes to bed. She left this part of the story out, and she lays down in her bed, and she said, "I used to just feel so comfortable, and just everything's going to be all right in the morning because he's going to be dead." And I'd wake up sometime early in the morning, and I mean, I'm freezing my rear end off, and I walk in there and I climb in bed, and she just mad at me because I'm survived. And I come home one time, and I was hanging my coat up in my closet, and she come out of the closet with this bat or a broom or something, I don't know, and hit me a couple of times and knocked me down. And she's not very big, you know, and I thought it was funny, and I started laughing, which was a bad mistake. It was a bad mistake. I shouldn't have done that, and she just beat the crap out of me, you know. So there was abuse in our home, and you know, but you know, we laugh about those kinds of things now. But the truth of the matter is my alcoholism took me to a place where I never ever want to get back to again. And I began to realize that I was having some real problems with her, and you know, we got to fighting each other, and we started doing things to each other that no people who love each other should do, and it turned pretty black, and I got got to where I was suicidal, and I'm not that kind of a guy. But I would pack her up with Glad bags and throw them in the back of my pickup, and we'd drive into town, and I'd toss them out in her mom's yard, and I'd spin off, and about 4 or 5 days later, it dawns on me my wife is gone, so I get to Samsonite, and we go back into town, we pack her back up and and this happened over and over again for many, many months, and we'd get in these fights, and we'd have, it got to where people wouldn't even want to be around us because we're just so volatile, and I'm sitting there with a gun stuck in my mouth every night for the longest time, and why I didn't pull the trigger, I don't know. Every once in a while I'd practice, and I'd put the squeeze to the trigger, and I'd finally snap, and I'd say, maybe next time I'll put a bullet in it. It's just just goofy things like that, and I mean, and somewhere along the line it began to dawn on me that, I'm kind of killing the wrong person here. The person that's really causing me all the grief is her. And I got to thinking about that, and it wasn't something that was a passing thought. It was something that was growing in its darkness, and like she said, we had these kids, and I got to thinking about that. It's no good deal, with those kids. And what happens with the kids whenever they find out that Dad killed Mom, and then Dad shot himself? I got to thinking about taking the kids out. And I mean, it wasn't something that just happened. It was something that grew. And it got blacker and got darker, and I can't even believe today that I thought like that then, but I did. And I was always packing a gun with me all the time, everywhere I went. And of course, it was getting close. You can't quite see them, but they're just right. Every once in a while, they're just right out there, just kind of out of sight, and they're closing in on you, and you just. I was kind of paranoid, I guess, and you just get to a place where it's just dark. And nobody wants to be around you. And I'd quit drinking every day. Every day. I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go, I can't believe, if I could remember what happened last night, I can't believe that that's what happened. And a lot of times I couldn't even begin to remember what was happening. I just remember that I don't remember. And I hate having to ask other people about what it was that I was doing, and I found myself doing that a lot. I just, every morning I wake up and I'm not going to drink again. I'm never going to have another drink again. And sure enough, a strange thing that always happened almost every day, I'm thinking, forever is a long time. I'm going to quit drinking for at least half a year. Now, if I can quit drinking for half a year, then that's pretty good, and then I'll prove that I'm not an alcoholic. And then maybe a couple hours go by and I'm going, half a year is a long time. I think though 30 days, if I stay sober for 30, I'm not going to have a drink for 30 days, and then I'll prove that I'm really not an alcoholic and I don't have a drinking problem. And then maybe an hour goes by and I'm going, 30 days is a long time. But I'm not going to drink the rest of this week. I'm not going to have a drink the rest of the week. And you know what happened? In a couple of minutes, I thought, screw it. Just screw it. I mean, come on. Why would you put yourself through this kind of stuff? People would say from time to time, John, you drink too much. You need to quit drinking. Well, you don't know what you're talking about. If you ask me to quit drinking, my head's going to fall off. I mean, I can't answer. The answer to my problem is another drink. Drinking's what I do to overcome the problems that my drinking's causing me. And I just couldn't turn loose of it. And I had this friend of mine. His name was Frank. And Frank come over to my house, and Frank and I were great drinking buddies. I mean, we get drunk all the time, every chance we got. And he had a feed store there in town, and he'd come out and deliver some feed, and we'd just have a party, just the two of us. And he'd come out one day, and Frank, have a drink. And Frank says, no, I'm not going to have a drink today. And I said, come on, Frank, have a drink. What's wrong? No, I'm not. I'm just not drinking just for today. And so we sit there for a little bit, and I'm an obnoxious drunk. If you don't want to have fun with me while I'm drinking, I'll have fun with you while I'm drinking. And I'm going, Frank, come on, have a drink. Have a drink, for crying out loud, Frank. And Frank said, no, I got to go, And I used to tell the story that Frank would start going up the stairs and I'd drag him back down. But I got to see Frank a few months ago. He died just a few months ago, and I got to see him about 4 or 5 months ago and visited with him a little bit about that night. And he remembered it well. And I said, well, I don't understand how I could keep you in that room as long as I did down those stairs. And he says, well, it's pretty simple, John. He says, whenever I said I was going to leave, you just pull your gun out and put it on me and say, sit down. I said, I didn't do that. And he says, yeah, you did. He says, I was the only one that was sober there, and you did. and I can't, I didn't know that. It's like more will be revealed. I mean, after 31 years, you finally hear that kind of stuff, and it's like, geez, that's not the guy I want to be, but that's the guy I was. And, the last drunk that I ever had, and I asked Frank, I said, Frank, what is really going on with you that you won't drink? And he says, well, I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, Frank, you what? He says, I joined Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, my God, Frank, you drink just like I do. And Frank goes, yeah, I know. And I says, well, Cindy and I hating each other pretty bad. I said, I'm a little suicidal now. I said, I don't really think I got a drinking problem, but maybe I do. Would you take me to a meeting? And Frank says, no. And I said, well, why not? He says, because Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who want to quit drinking, and you're still drinking, obviously. And I remember waking up that next morning thinking, my God, this drinking is getting out of hand. I almost went to A&A last night, for crying out loud. I got to knock this. I got to have to get on top of this. And what I did for the next 6 months, I just died one day at a time. I don't have no fancy story. I mean, there's nothing, I didn't even get a DUI. I didn't run off the road. I didn't kill nobody. I didn't do nothing. All I did was every day was a little worse than yesterday. Every day I just took a little bit of my integrity and chopped it down. Every day I began to realize that everything I hated and despised in this world is exactly what I was becoming. And I couldn't quit drinking. I could not quit drinking. I would quit, and I would just, it's like, every once in a while I'll make it a day or two, maybe two, but maybe twice I did that in 6 months.
To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
And I'm going, this is crazy. This is just crazy. And somewhere along Thanksgiving, I went on my last run, and I don't know. Once I take a drink, I don't know. I might be gone for 3 or 4 hours. I may be gone for 3 or 4 weeks. I don't know. I have no idea in the world what happens to John after his first drink. I don't know. I just know it's going to be something. And even if I have a couple of drinks and then I go home, and I'm glad because I didn't get drunk, then I open a fifth and finish it off at home, So I always drank. It seemed like my idea of not drinking meant that you didn't get drunk. You can get drunk, but not drunk. Because if you get drunk, you're drinking. But if you're just drunk, then you're okay. So, that's the way I thought. And anyway, my last drunk that I went on started, I think it was Thanksgiving, and I went out for bread or something. I don't know. It's kind of hearsay. I ended up waking up on December 18th, 1982, in a basement of a place that I didn't know. You know how we are. You wake up like that, and you try and remember. Now, what was it? Where have I been? Where's my money? What's going on here? And you got to go ask those people that question about what it is that I did. And you got to ask it in such a way that they don't know that you don't know. And that causes torque in your life. That's not easy to do. And you don't want to ask her because she's going to exaggerate. She always did. And I ended up the guy's house. The guy's name was Johnny, and he and I sat there that morning, and I said, I have got to do something. I'm going to go see Frank because Frank at least knows where these A&A meetings are. And so we drove over to the feed store. And Frank was just elated to see us. I mean, he was excited, and he got to 20 questions. You know, I think they got more now, but at that time it was 20 questions. And it's a test that nobody can pass. I just want you to know that right now. He comes out there, and Johnny and I are out there in this pickup, and we're nervous. I've been drinking for a long time now, since Thanksgiving, and this is the end of December, and I'm going, I've got to have some beer to just calm down, to keep me from falling completely off the edge of the earth. And I remember asking Frank to come out and talk to me and Johnny, and we come out there, and he gives Johnny the 20 questions. Johnny couldn't pass the test either, Frank, you still going to those AA meetings? And he says, yeah. He says, would you take us? He goes, no. I said, well, why not, Frank? He said, because you guys are drinking. He says, Alcoholics Anonymous is for people who quit drinking, and you're still drinking, obviously. He says, don't drink. I says, go home. I says, go ahead and drink the rest of the day, but tomorrow when you get up, do not drink, and I'll take you to meeting tomorrow night. So, I mean, it was Saturday. It's Saturday. Everybody knows you don't quit on Saturday. You shouldn't even quit on Sunday. Monday's okay to quit on, but Saturday is out, So I was okay with it, and we ended up going to the keg bar and I'm sitting over in the keg bar, and I always really want to remember how wonderful that last drunk was that I had. I'm sitting over there in the keg bar by myself, crying because I'm by myself, and then you come over and I want to fight you. And then you leave, and then I'm over there in the keg bar, sitting in the corner by myself, crying because I'm by myself. Now that was high living, and then I made a hideous judgment screw up, and I ended up having to go to the bathroom and throwing my underwear away, and that wasn't so bad because about an hour and a half later I made the same mistake again. Except this time there ain't nothing to throw. And I just want to remember how great it was, that euphoric recall that we all talk about. You really think about it. Some of it was not very cool. And I went to that first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that next night, and Frank says, I want you to meet across the street at the restaurant. And I said, I want you to meet somebody. And Frank introduces me to this guy named Richard, and Richard was from Southern California. And he was a used car salesman, and he had a bad back, and he wore a three-piece suit with wingtip shoes and smoked cigarettes like he was going to go out of style any second. And he asked me weird questions. I remember this. He says, John, do you feel like you're responsible for your own actions? And I'm going, oh, man, it's a test. I've been trying to get into this elite group of Alcoholics Anonymous for the last 6 months, and I'm sure if I don't come up with the right answer, they're not going to let me in. And I'm not even sure if I want to get in, but you know how we are. If you tell us we can't have it, that's all we can think about. And so I'm going, yeah. I think I am responsible. And Richard says, good. Maybe now you'll start acting like it. And I knew right then that he'd been talking to Frank, and Frank had been talking to Cindy, which wasn't happening because Cindy wasn't talking to anybody at that time. And I didn't know. I just don't know. I don't know what to do. And they said, well, come on, we're going to come on over to the meeting. And so we went over the meeting, and I don't remember anything about that first meeting except there was a gal there, and her and I raised our hands, and I've never seen her again since. And I don't remember who was there. I found out later who was there, but I don't remember a word that was said. The only thing that I do remember is for the first time in a long time, I felt just a little tinge of hope that somebody might. I understood. I had this secret weapon. In the morning of the day before, when we got through talking to Frank, we went to the keg bar. Johnny and I went to the bar, and there was 5 people at the keg bar at 8:30 in the morning. Me and Johnny and the bartender and 2 other guys, and I had these guys take the 20-question test, and nobody in the bar at 8:30 in the morning could pass the test either. So I have this secret weapon. I know things that aren't true and love to believe them, and I begin to understand what the problem was. alcoholics. With a name like that, you're not going to get much membership. So you devise this test that nobody can pass, you know. And what you have to do in a couple of, you know, once you join up, you got to pay somebody $50 a month or something, you know. I mean, I just know these things. I mean, so anyway, I'm sitting there at that meeting that next night, and they're talking about sponsors, and I go, well, there it is. That's who you got to pay, and this guy named Johnny, who was an auctioneer, says, I'll be your sponsor. And I didn't know what a sponsor was, and I'm fine, you know, it don't matter. And he says, you'll come home with me tonight. And so I went over to his house, and he introduced me to his family. And he had 2 kids and a wife, and they all said, you know, Dad used to drink, but Dad don't drink no more, and life is good, and all that kind of stuff. And I remember hearing that, you know, and you're new. I mean, if you're like me, I'm very skeptical, but I'm listening to these people, and it's like, well, it was interesting. And at 2 o'clock, the bars in Montana closed down, and he says, oh, it's 2 o'clock. It's time for you to go home now.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
So I said, all right. So I drove home, and he says, now in the morning, come see me. And he had this auctioneer business. And so I went in there that next morning, and I visited with him for a while. Along about 11 o'clock, 2 guys from the group showed up. They took me out to eat, and about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they switched me over with another 2 guys from the group, and they took me to the meeting. And after the meeting, Johnny says, you'll go to the meeting, after the meeting tonight, you'll come over to my house and talk to my family again. So, I mean, they did, and they fed me this concoction of K-Roll syrup and honey and orange juice and throwed it all in this blender and vitamins, and I don't know what the vitamins were. And anyway, they drink this, it'll make you feel better. And it didn't, but I told them it did because I didn't want to drink anymore. And they just kind of took care of me like that. And they just kind of took me under their arm and carried me along for several days. And all of a sudden, when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous like that, it was like amazing. People began to talk about the way I felt, and I never felt whole. And they talked about that kind of stuff. They talked about how they felt when they drank and how it gave them, it just seemed to give them what they were missing. And I almost immediately fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous and the people here. You know, but if you're new, this is how I felt after about 3 months of sobriety. Now, I know this has probably never happened to many people in here, but I started to see the flaws in those old people. You know, I mean, they talk about love and tolerance is our code and that kind of stuff. And you can tell right off the bat they're lying, you know, because, I mean, I'll give you some examples. You know, Cindy was talking about Millie, little old Millie. She was a great gal, and she'd say, John, come over and sit next to me. And I'd sit next to Millie, and she'd pat me on the leg. People would be coming in. She says, John, just look at all the miracles. And I'm going, Millie, I don't see no damn miracles. And she says, that's okay, John. You just keep coming back until you can see the miracles. And used to be a gal named Margaret. And Margaret, I don't know why they called on Margaret, but they'd do it. And she'd say, hi, my name is Margaret. And them that go to meetings stay sober, and them that don't, thank you. It's like, for crying out loud, calling somebody's got a message, you know. And then this guy named Gerald. Gerald was about 2 years out of the nut house, and he come up to me one time. He says, John, how you doing? And I mean, he asked, and so I'm telling him how I was doing, you know. And he finally says, shut up. He says, that's enough of that crap. He says, from now on, when I ask you I don't want to know how you're doing, okay? He says, when I ask you how you're doing, you reach your hand out, you shake my hand, you look me in the eyes, and you say, why, Gerald, I'm getting better in every way, every day. Thank you very much. Now, this is an honesty program. If you're new, I just want you to know that. But they got me lying almost right off the bat. It's this sponsor that I got by this time. My first sponsor, Johnny, after, you know, he's sober 7 years, and after about 45 days of me being in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, he would call me up in the middle of the night and say, John, you got to get in here. They're in my closet, and they're going to get out of there, and they're going to get me. You need to get in here and help me out. I was new, but I wasn't stupid. And I'm going, well, I don't think I'll make it in there tonight. And then a couple of nights later, Johnny called me up and says, I can see them out there in the car. They're out there in the car. They're smoking a cigarette. You can see and they're going to come in here, and they're going to get me, and you need to get in here and help me out. And this is a long time before caller ID and stuff, and I'd hang up the phone because I'm not going to go help him out. And one of his other guys would call me up and says, have you talked to Johnny tonight? And I said, yeah, I have. He's just a little twisted off tonight. And yeah, he sure is. And I'd talk to the old guys in the group and talk to them about what they should do to help him. And they said, there's some of us that are just beyond human aid. He says, Johnny's not listening to anybody. He's mad at the group, mad at the sponsor, everybody else, and we can't do nothing for him. And he went out and got drunk, after 7 years. So that taught me a great lesson right off the bat. Time's important, but you can't store this thing up. You got to give it away to keep it. And I ended up, all that next night, I ended up going, I had a kind of resentment because I didn't get to pick my sponsors. A lot of guys in the group got to pick their sponsor, and I didn't get to pick my sponsor. And I've been kind of watching this little blonde, and I wondered what she had and was willing to go to any lengths to get it. And I was walking across the room, and Richard, this guy that I met the first night, says, he intercepts me and says, John, I'm sorry, I hear about Johnny. He's gone out, and he says, you need a sponsor. And I said, yeah. And he says, and I'm going to be your sponsor. And I said, no, I didn't want to ask you to be my sponsor. He says, John, he says, I didn't ask you to be your sponsor. I am going to be your sponsor. He always knew what I needed. He was a used car salesman, and about 2 or 3 weeks later, he sold me a diesel car that I really wanted. I didn't know that I wanted it, but, and so I got him for a sponsor now. So I'm driving his diesel car, and there's a guy named Rotten Ralph, and Rotten Ralph was an attorney, and he come by the name right, and he would if say some new guy was, even though his sponsor said not to say anything, say some new guy was saying something bad about how his wife had been treating him the last 13 years. And they just call him next almost always, and then he would sit there and just beat the snot out of you with words, about, you immature little. And after he gets done, he'd always do that. He's just the weirdest thing. He'd reach in his pocket and says, now, if I have made you so mad that you feel like you need to have a drink, let me buy your first drink. Now, this ain't no way to treat new people, for crying out loud. Come on. And then there's this guy named Nick, and Nick was a little short guy, and Nick used to always say, there's no reason for me to remember a new person's name unless they've been here for a year, because if you are not here for a year, you're just a visitor. What? The love and tolerance is our code. He hadn't read nothing either. And so I'm going, I'm going to get this Nick, and I'm going to have him remember my name. So I asked him in my very best newcomer voice, I said, Nick, you got a minute? Nick says, sure, and we sit down at the couch. He was a very kind guy. I was just new. I heard everything wrong, And I says, Nick, and I started talking about how Cindy had been jacking me around for the last 13 years. And he said, shut up. He said, just shut up, John. He says, you're wasting my time. He says, if you want to drink, go get drunk. But he says, if you want to get sober, get sober. But he said it in a real loud, shrill voice, fast. And there's about 8 or 10 people left around the group, and I can't stand humiliation like that. And I'm done. I've jumped up, and I says, fine, I'm out of here. And I went to go out the door, and he was a crippled up old man, but beat me to the door, pushes me up against the wall and says, listen, you're wasting my time, you're wasting their time, and you're wasting your time. Now, if you want to drink, go get drunk. But if you want to get sober, then you better start changing your ways. And out of no place over the top of his shoulders, Rotten Ralph, let me buy you first drink, let me buy you first drink, And I went out there and I jumped in that diesel car of mine, and I was going to spin gravel. Now, this is an old diesel. This is not the new ones. And it's, just you could hardly see that I was moving, And I'm on the way out to the ranch, and I'm beating the dash, and I'm honking the horn, and I'm yelling at the top of my voice, and it's just absolutely immature as you could possibly get. And it's like somebody just slapped me. It's like, so you're an alcoholic. So you're an alcoholic. Now, what are you going to do about it? what are you going to do about it? Are you willing to take the rest of your life and keep living the way you're living, which isn't going to be very long? Or are you willing to change the way you think and the way you act and the way you feel? And I didn't know that that was happening. I don't know most of the things that happened to me until I look back at it. But I began to realize that I really needed to do something really different if I was going to survive. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous seemed like to me. It seemed like survival, not living, survival. And it's like, it's like I begin to kind of think about these kinds of things. And the next day, I don't got nothing going on. I don't have no important meetings or anything. I'm just barely around anyway. And I got to go back to that meeting again. And God, I just hate to do that. You get to look at all the miracles, and sure they'll call him Margaret, just sure as heck. And the next thing you know, there's Gerald. He's always at the door. How you doing, John? Well, Gerald, I'm getting better in every way, every day. Thank you very much. And then I got to give Ralph his damn $1 back on top of that, and then Nick, I got to say something to Nick. So I went through the gauntlet, and I got to Nick finally, and I says, Nick, I just want you to know, I'm sorry for my behavior last night. I shouldn't have acted the way I did, he puts his hands on my shoulders, and he says, John, he says, I'm going to tell you something. He says, there's a lot of good in you. He says, you know why I know there's a lot of good in you, John? And I mean, I'm cracking up. I got tears rolling down my eyes because this is the kindest I've ever seen this guy ever. And he's going, I know there's a lot of good in you. You know why? And I go, no, I don't know. He says, because everybody's born with the same amount, and you haven't used a damn bit of yours yet. I said, jeez. They don't quit. They just keep on coming. It's like one of them says, if you can stay sober here, you can stay sober anywhere, So anyway, a few months go by, and Richard's asking me about how's my relationship with my wife working. And I said, well, I'm getting a divorce. He says, now, wait a minute. I want to understand that this is what's happening. You are getting the divorce, not her. And I says, yeah, I'm getting a divorce. Spent some good money on it already, too. He says, you'll quit that right now. I says, wait a minute. You don't understand. She's crazy. Oh, yeah, he says, anybody been married to you for 14 years got to be plumb out of her stinking mind. He says, she's there, and you can practice on her, and you're not going to hurt her because she's already messed up. And he says, I'm going to tell you something, the Al-Anons here, don't get mad at me for this, because I would never say anything like this, but this is what my sponsor said. He says, I want to tell you something. They are sicker than we are. And I'm going, yeah, why? And he says, well, it's simple. You went through those 13 years, at least you had a sedative and you was able to drink and get relief. She did it cold sober. He says, but don't tell her that. So I jumped in my diesel car and went back out to the ranch. Guess what Richard said, And then anyway, he says, he says, you're going to quit this divorce thing. And I said, well, I don't love her. He says, I don't care. He says, you're going to quit this divorce thing. He says, we don't do anything in here for the first year that has any really significant changes. And he says, that's a significant change. You got family, you got kids, you got her. He says, we're going to practice on her. You don't know how to have a relationship anyway, so we're going to practice on her. And he says, first off, you're going to really start treating her kind. And he says, you're going to start doing things for her that'll change your relationship. Now, he had moved from California to Montana to teach his wife, who was still living in California, a lesson. This is how AA works, okay? Just so you know. If you don't worry about where the information's coming from, because it's probably they're not doing it. But anyway, just so you know. So anyway, I'm going, well, what do you mean? He says, because I was thinking he was talking about getting back in the big bed, and that wasn't, he told me right off the bat that wasn't what he was talking about. And he says, from now on, he says, I want you to pick up after yourself. He says, when you take a shower, hang up your towels. When you have supper, clean up the dishes. Take her out to eat every once in a while. Treat her kind. And tell her you love her. Lying again. They got me lying again. And he says, listen, tell her you love her, all right? Just tell her you love her. And I said, I ain't going to do it. I ain't going to do it. I'm not going to clean up my dishes. I'm not going to, she can pick up. She don't do anything in the house anyway, so I'm going to let her take care of all that. He says, no, sir. He says, you will do these things. He says, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a little hope here. If you do it, and you do it right, it'll drive her crazy. Okay, I'll do it. So I started to do that. And you know what? I didn't get any better, but she changed. She changed. All of a sudden, she began to change and mellow just a little bit, and I don't want you to think that we had a wonderful relationship right off the bat. It took us 4 years. It took 4 years. I can tell you the day I finally surrendered. She was talking about surrender. I can tell you the hour of the day that I surrendered. It's hard for people like us. People like us, we think we know. We think we know, but we don't know. And when you think you know, you're in trouble. But the minute you begin to realize that you don't know, things change. And I began to realize that I didn't have any right whatsoever to be in judgment of her. I needed to make sure that I took care of my side of the street. And I don't know how to do that. I have no idea in the world how to be kind to somebody else unless I look at you and what you do. You guys are the people that's given me the gift of being able to say I'm wrong and mean it, and make some kind of restitution behind that. I'm not an easy guy to live with. I'll guarantee you what, I am not. I think I am. I think I'm funny when I'm hurting other people's feelings. I think I'm serious when other people think I'm laughing. I don't know. I am so amazed that I can live in here and not know much about it. But I watch you and how you react to me, and I got a pretty good idea how I probably am. I don't know. I'm so blessed. I am so blessed to not have made the mistakes that I could have made. I could have shot her. I could have shot myself. I'd have killed the wrong guy. I could have divorced her. But instead, we stayed together because I have some doggone car salesman who's fighting his wife tell me not to. I mean, that's not right, for crying out loud. And then in the background, you keep hearing God's will. This is what God would do. It's like I have no connection with God. God hates me, and I hate him. I mean, why in the world would I be? He says, pray. And I said, I don't believe in God. He says, good. We don't care. He says, AA is a strange place. We don't care if you don't believe in God. We don't care if you do believe in God. We don't even care if you think you're God. It don't make any difference. What you do is you do the actions that we ask you to do, and on the other side, you'll begin to realize what you were going to get. And I never knew what I really, really wanted. And they said, if you give up on everything, you'll begin to get everything you ever wanted. But what it is you don't know yet. And I'm going, I don't know what the hell you guys are talking about. And he's going, it's a simple deal. You got to give up to win. And I don't know how to give up. I just don't know how to give up. So I keep coming to meetings, and I don't know how to treat her kind. I really don't. And the guy says, there's a new guy over there. You need to go talk to him. I only got like 6 or 8 months. I can't talk to the new guy. I don't have nothing to say. He says, get over there and talk to him. Tell him how bad your life is. It'll make him feel better or something, And so I start doing this kind of stuff. And the next thing you know, I begin to treat him like I love him. And then one day I begin to treat her like I love her. See, I don't know how to have relationships. Like she said, my sponsor says, we're not going to work on her. She's got nothing to do with you. You're the problem. And until you realize what's going on inside of you, nothing much is going to happen. John and my old home group, and Sunday, you are in for a treat. There's a gal, a little blonde girl, going to be talking here tomorrow, or Sunday. No, tomorrow, Sunday. Happens to come to our old home group, and I ain't going to say any more, but I am looking forward. That's I was excited when I heard you was going to be here, so I'm glad Terry's here. I'm glad John's here. It's just kind of like old home week for me. Now I forgot what the heck I was talking about. How long have I been talking? I've probably been talking too long, haven't I? No? All right. I don't even know where it was. Cindy was talking about Becky, our daughter, coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had my sponsor at the time was Jim Shaw. I've had 5 sponsors. all of them are dead except the last one, and I've had them one at a time. So my first sponsor, I told you about him already. My second sponsor, Richard, he died of lung cancer, and you know, all the things that we learned from our sponsors and the people that are here before us. You know, he was in the hospital dying from lung cancer, and I go in there and ask him how he is doing. He says, "Don't worry about me." He says, "You just take care of that nurse." You know, I mean, that's big. That's a big deal for a guy like me to see that, you know. And Jim was my sponsor after that, and Jim died of lung cancer. And Jim was going to celebrate his 30th birthday, and his sponsor is coming over to see him. And there's a couple of guys that had that same year, and they were going to have a dinner, and Jim was just kind of sitting in his chair, you know, and he's just kind of lifeless, and he had his shirt was not really done up and stuff, and he's just kind of sitting there. And his sponsor drives up in his car, and Jim just comes to life. He pulls himself together, he straightens up his tie, and he buttons a button, he pulls his coat on, and he says, "There's my sponsor. There's my sponsor." And he walks to the door, and he opens the door. And I was there for about 2 or 3 days before that, and he was just like he was gone. And 2 or 3 days after that, he was present, you know. Now, I don't know. You know, they say you don't put people on pedestals around here, but I'm afraid I do. There's people that when I grow up, I want to be like them. You know, there's people here that are very kind and very loving, and you know, if they go out and drink, I'm not going to follow them out of there. I mean, why would I do that? But I tell you, there's people I admire in Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're the people that's on the front line doing the work, and and it's not because they have to, it's because they want to. And then I guess in a way it is because they have to, because you got to keep trying to give this away in order to keep it. You know, I always think about a guy I used to sponsor. He had 7 years in the program, and he wouldn't sponsor anybody because he'd always say, "I'm just too sick." And but he's been dead now for years. You know, it's just an amazing deal to come here and to give up of myself having everything I ever wanted, and I get everything I ever wanted. It's an amazing deal. You know, I've got to tell you, Miss Margaret, her little saying about, you know, those that go to meet and stay sober and those that don't is true to a large degree. But those that go to meetings and do the work, that's part of the deal too. Little Millie was right too. I've been able to stay here long enough to see the miracles, and this morning I see a lot of miracles. Thank you. Thanks, buddy.
We hope you've enjoyed this recording. To obtain additional copies, receive a free catalog of AA and Al-Anon talks, or to find out about our tape and CD of the Month Club, call Encore Audio Archives at 1-800-878-1308, or visit our website at www.12steptapes.com.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.